And let me share my screen. Okay. So the purpose of this presentation is to introduce the project management context, I guess. We don't really want to start looking at project management per se. What we want to be looking at is where does the project management exist? So that's essentially what the purpose of this presentation is. We'll see how we go on for time. It would be nice to be finished within an hour and a half or so, but we have a good bit of material to go through. Actually, before I forget, take note that we will have a quiz on project management, the context, next week. And the way the quiz will be set up, be very careful about this. The quiz will only be open for 1 day. Okay, so it will be open from 6 o'clock next Tuesday until 6 o'clock the following Wednesday. And there will be no, that will be that. There will be only one attempt available, but there will be about 45 minutes for the 10 questions, so that you should be able to complete it within a reasonable space of time. That follows quite closely how this is done on a day, 6 p.m. Yes, during the day course, because in the day course module, there is only 15 minutes available, and the quiz is open over a period of 3 hours. So I think I will give the opportunity now. If the quiz is put over the weekend, then I'm only opening it up for 3 hours, because again, that's a full day. So I think 24 hours is probably best. I need to put some constraints around it. I think the 24 hours Wednesday afternoon until Tuesday afternoon until Wednesday afternoon is reasonable.
Michael, will it be like pretty much the same as the sample quiz you gave us online this week? There won't be any questions. It's just
10 questions, multiple choice, and that's it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And I understand the difficulty with work and other lectures, but at the same time, I am reluctant to leave it be until further time. So I might put up a poll. To see how people prefer it, but my preference would be to have it open for the 24 hours from Tuesday until Wednesday, because it's how other courses being run, and I kind of like that idea. And again, if it turns out that the polls show that people prefer to have the weekend, then I might adjust, but I would prefer not to. I prefer to do it during the weekday. 10 questions. It's going to take less than 10 minutes. And I people do forget this quiz. If there is some stake and some urgency associated with doing of that quiz during the weekday, you mightn't forget. We might be less likely to forget, and people forget. And I had numerous requests last semester to extend the deadlines, which I wasn't happy to be doing. So that's where I'm coming from, and why I want to put some constraints around to essentially avoid this situation. Right. Anyway, that's just kind of really an announcement. Let's get after the project management, because that's the purpose of this. So today we're going to talk about organizational context, so types of organizations that are out there, and then we're really going to focus on the first column over here. So that's the good majority of it. We're also going to talk about what project is, and then the project management framework is going to come into this next week. Today we're also going to speak briefly about qualities of project manager. So what project managers should be able to do. So project is first. For me, the best way to think about a project is something like this. As a company, so as an organization progresses from the current state to a future state where the value of the business is higher, So we can see that this is a chart. On the y-axis, we have business value. On the x-axis, we have time. So at some stage in the future, the value of the business is higher. So here we have future. Here we have some additional value that business have gained, and we're going from current state, which is where we are right now in this particular time, to some future state where we want to achieve those qualities that we mentioned, the better business value. And project is what brings us there, essentially, for most organizations. Project is a set of activities that bring us from the current state into a future state where the value of the business is increasing. The business is more able to respond to changing environments. Business is capable, organization is carrying out and completing its vision and its mission. It's achieving its strategic objectives and so on. And project is essentially the thing that we do to achieve this. So kind of a little bit more complex than that, but in kind of grand snapshot, really, that's how I see it. Bringing us from now into the future where we are better off than we had been. So obviously there are kind of, things that we need to be able to say about projects. So their specific objective is the first thing. So there is a goal in a project. If there is no objective, it's not a project. If there is no goal, there is no goal, no end output, something that project produces or makes happen, then it's not a project, it's something else. Project is also constrained, and it has constraint of time, resources, and money. So time is the first constraint, so has defined start and defined end dates, or we know by when project needs to be finished. It has some funding limits, so it has a budget. And it's also constrained by human and possibly non-human resources, so money, people, or equipment, whichever. And this is slightly related to what we're going to be talking about later. They're multifunctional, related to what organizations are like, what the structure organization is. So a company can have a specific structure. We'll explore some of those structures. And projects cut across functions within an organization. That's essentially the bottom line here. They're multifunctional. So again, just going over the characteristics. Temporary, so time constraint. There is time constraint, there is a funding constraint, there is a specific objective. They're unique, so they're non-repetitive, as opposed to process work. Process work would be repetitive, and it would be happening around the same time in many different ways. And this progressive elaboration idea is an interesting one, because it means that as you start the project from let's say fairly nebulous and unclear idea about what the project objective is, or maybe rather how the project objective is going to be achieved, through a process of progressive elaboration, or the discovery of the path into the future, you're actually going to be able to arrive at the future that the project is supposed to bring. And different ways of doing project work might make it more possible. So I'm doing sprints, doing multiple builds and iterations, being more agile with how we do the projects. So that's definitely making it possible, especially if the end is nebulous and there is no clear path forward. But the main characteristics that we need to remember is that they're unique, temporary, constrained, and sometimes the path is not clear. We can think about the differences between projects and operations, and that's something manufacturing versus development would be a metaphor that might be good to use, for sending kids to school versus getting your kid admitted to a new project. That's operations versus project. Or special new publications versus daily new publication, again operations versus project. Soap manufacturing or creation of the first prototype. So that will be something that is pertinent to manufacturing and producing organizations, where process is a part of operations, whereas development is part of the project. So development would be most commonly project work, not always, but most commonly. Projects are initiated for many reasons, but the key reasons would be satisfy stakeholder requests or needs, and this is what we understand when we say about customers. So customer is someone that has a keen interest in the project because they will use the output of the project for some of their purposes or objectives. And a customer is someone who, how to say it, someone who is going to use the project output. A stakeholder is someone who has a keen interest in the project. So we're going to talk about stakeholder management at some later stage when it's important. But also, projects are initiated because some requirement needs to be needed or strategy. That's an important point. There is an activity is required to be carried out in order to actualize or make happen the business strategy of the organization. And then obviously creation, improvement, and fixing of the projects are fairly well recognized. And two ways of thinking about the constraints of a project. The projects are constrained in numerous different ways: time, cost, and scope. So things that you need to do, time you have to do within, cost within which you're going to have to complete that project, but also they can be thought about that you're constrained by competing constraints of value, quality, and image reputation, while you have to satisfy the outputs of scope, risk, time, and cost. So there are two different ways. That's two different ways of thinking and looking at this. That's the two different ways of looking at it, and I would imagine that this is probably the more reasonable for the time being, where project is something that constrained by time, cost, and scope, while you have to satisfy some metrics of quality, value, risk, image, and reputation. So again, that's all about project. So just going back to the project versus operations distinction, as we mentioned, projects are temporary, unique, and kind of being figured out as they are, whereas operations are happening all the time, pretty much. They're repetitive and unending. So that's our widget cranker, that or beer cranker really in this case. As they're happening, there isn't really that much learning going on, which is not fully true, because within a learning organization, even a mature process can lead to some learning in terms of efficiencies, or in terms of the tool sets used and whatnot. So there is learning that might be happening all the time, but it wouldn't be something that like lessons learned during the project development. Now, if project is successful, you have a new product. That new product might have to be produced as in a process. So successful project may lead to new operations, and that's a useful thing to remember when you consider the value that the company is creating. So when you bring from point A into point B on the value versus time chart, you arrive at this point here, point B. Now it's time to start extracting this value going forward, so at least the company doesn't end up in some worse off spot going to the future. And the way to start extracting this value is through operations. Make sure that your process is running smoothly and delivering on its KPIs and on the yields and whatnot, and other parameters that the company or the organization might have. Now, project has many, 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 many variables of success, things that need to go well for the project to succeed. Most projects fail, I think, actually. That might be a reasonable statistic. I think for IT, it's something like 70% failing projects. Failing, what I mean that fail in the sense that they don't achieve the objective. Most commonly, they're just scrapped before they can arrive at a completion gate, and that's related to something we're going to talk about in a little while. Anyway, a lot of things have to go wrong, so we have to have the right teams right team members, you have to have a commitment in your team. So that's something that we spoke about last week, where we have to be able to motivate our team. But we also need to get support from the top of the company. So support from the organization, and then as a project manager, we're in this little box, and we have to deal with the organization, we have to deal with the project team, we have to deal with the stakeholders, we have to deal with the customer, while trying to make sure that we arrive at the project output. So we have to do a lot of things while maintaining a good relationship with the client. So we're public image of the project is important, especially when organization reviews their project portfolios frequently. And if it would be good to be in a project that has nice public image, so that it doesn't get scrapped. um, develop realistic schedule, cost, and performance estimates. I mean, you can have the best run project ever, but if that project doesn't meet the unrealistic goals of cost or quality or performance or whatever else KPI you're going to be judging your project on, then the project is a failure. You have to think about the risks that you might encounter along your way. So the potential problems, the risks that you might see, and but you have to have a backup. This is another one I think that's very important. Keep changes under control, and it's related to this process of progressive elaboration of the project. As the progressive elaboration progresses from point A to B, from A to B, it might turn out that to get from B to C, you need to do some change to one of the project parameters. So whatever that project parameter is, it doesn't really matter too much, but if you have to do a change in your project, change will affect a lot of parts of your project, and it would be good and useful to have a mechanism to keep changes under control. And if you can keep changes under control, you're increasing the likelihood of your project success. And then, especially for project-based organizations, which we'll cover in a few minutes, you have to seek ways of assuring job security for effective project team members. In pure project organizations, the job security is something that is not a priority for the organization per se, and that might lead to lower motivation. So if you're in a project-based organization, pure project organization, it might be useful to think about ways of assuring job security to obtain higher levels of commitment and motivation from the project team members. So these are the variables of success. On the other hand, we have some variables of failure, which are kind of straightforward enough. You don't have accountability, responsibility, no communication or commitment. You're shortchanging yourself because you have too many projects at once. You lose support because the project that you've been running turns out not to be aligned with this company strategy anymore. No leadership in the project team, but also organization, no focus, and poor execution. Probably most common one. The second most common one, fairly frequent in many organizations, to see too many projects. Lack of leadership, not as common, I would imagine, because after all, people are good at what they do and good at bringing things to fruition. So lack of communication would be the biggest one in my estimation. And okay, that's variables of failure. And now we need to think about, where does the project exist within the organization? So, like, if you think about what organization does, is that organization has some vision, some mission that it sees for yourself, and then it has a vision, and those two things are interrelated. You want to become the best, how to say, you want to become a producer of highest quality pharmaceuticals in the world, or you might want to become company that deals with signal processing and become best in the world on that, or whatever the vision, whatever the mission of the company is. Those two things, the vision and the mission of the organization, is going to inform the strategy. So those two things are collectively going to inform the strategy. So the strategy is going to be a long-term plan that the company is going to set up in order to be able to execute its mission, so that its vision becomes true. So yeah, that's a lot of business talk really, but it's kind of, you're planning, you have a vision for the future, and you see some responsibility for yourself as an organization in the future. So you plan on how to make that happen. And the way for organizations to make this happen is through portfolios, programs, and projects. And these are all just ways of organizing work. That's all it is, just ways of organization. So how the work is structured within the company, where are the lines of communication, what are the reporting relationships, how are the budgets assigned, and so on and so forth. What are the priorities for the organizations, and within the organization of work, I'll add of work in here. Within the organization of work, you have this continuous feedback and review system, where you just continue look at projects and programs, and you look at inputs into your portfolio, so that you can change it. So programs and projects that are not performing are going to be removed from the portfolio. Inputs into the portfolio ideas or project ideas might be added to the programs or the project list so that they get done. And eventually, when the program where projects are successful, they're going to lead to operations. And then operation is feeding back into the strategy, because if it turns out that the operations that we're doing at the moment are not responding to our customers' needs, we probably need to review our strategy in order to make sure that we have a viable business going into the future. A good example of this type of a scenario is, I think, IBM, which started in probably 1940s or 1950s as a computer mainframe provider. So they provide a computer with a workstation, and they made a great business out of that. But as their computer parts became cheaper and the personal computer came to be, I guess, they became personal computer providers or manufacturers, and they made a great business out of that. But obviously, that business segment was also subject to the race to the bottom. So I think IBM, in their operations, again, their loss of income or lower income of their operations, or losses of revenue from the operations, led to the change of their strategy. And I think what they're doing at the moment, and I might be wrong in this, is moving towards cloud computing and consulting, something along those lines. So they have changed their strategy on numerous occasions to arrive at the current strategy and current mission, let's say. So this kind of organizational review goes on all the time, and the specific methods for project selections are used, different types of methods actually, and so that best projects are selected. And some of them can be based on, let me just put this here, net present value, or internal rate of return. I think we'll talk about this later on when we talk about portfolios and programs at a little bit more depth. But that's all at the moment, really. So again, as we go through the organizational strategy, with portfolio decisions, also decide strategy, I would suggest that strategy informs the portfolio decisions. So if you can, this is probably much clearer from this slide. organizational strategy, decide on portfolio. So if the strategy is that the company is going to become a yellow widget cranking company, but all the company does at the moment is green widget cranking, the sample portfolio is going to include development of yellow widget cranking process, or yellow widget as a tool. So it's the strategy that informs the portfolio decisions. And in the sample portfolio, you could have a numerous number of projects, numerous projects which could rather be part of a program if projects have a similar type of an objective. Program allows for a better budgeting control, better resource control, just makes things a little bit neater. Having things in a box is better than having them all floating around in the floor, I guess. Just allows for better organization. And obviously you have operations which are also informing the portfolio, and here in this particular context, operations are also related to program C. So there is definite clear set of relationships between different aspects of the sample of the portfolio, and in the way in which the portfolio feeds into the strategy, or strategy feeds into the portfolio. Now, all of this thing where projects are being done, where organization is executing their strategy to arrive at operations and increase their value, is done in some environment by some organization. So organization is not separate from doing the project, as in the same way as a project is not separate from the organization. And projects are not done out in out in the void. Projects are not separate from the real world. They're actually true activities that happen within the world, within reality. So that's how they need to be considered, and we need to look at how they're situated in reality. And things that influence process are obviously the things called EEFs and OPAs. So EEFs, and this is the abbreviation we're going to see going forward, and this is another one, so OPA. And we'll see it at every single lecture going forward. So we have enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets. So if you want to think about EEFs, these are the EEFs. The EEF, I guess, is the kind of substrate from which the organization is operating. So like if you want to think about the internal enterprise environmental factors, you have the infrastructure and facilities, you have the employee capability, which is another factor. You have the context of the company, like on its path of development, I guess. You have the organizational culture and structure, you have the IT systems that are internal enterprise environmental factors, and you have resource availability. So anything that's related to where the work is done and what tools the work is done on, that would be the internal enterprise environmental factor. The environment in which the project is going to be operating. Obviously, on the other hand, there is the external set of enterprise environmental factors. The key things would be legal requirements, standards, that's for manufacturing and pharmaceuticals in particular. Obviously, finance availability of the capital, and then close related is the current and future, and also past market conditions, and how the company responded to changes in those market conditions. Availability of information when it's needed and in a format that's required. The environment in which the organization operates. It's going to be much easier to build a new, let's say, new manufacturing hall on plain flats for some organization than it will be to build in mountainous terrain. Simply physical environment affects the operations of the organization, and also availability and quality of the research that the organization can make use of. So, for instance, in Ireland, we would have very strong, very strong and very high quality of pharmaceutical research. We would have very strong quality of chemical processing research as well. Slightly, um, slightly worse on physical sciences. Very good on the IT side as well, actually. So that would be and also in financial technology. So Ireland would be quite high up there in terms of the research output and the research quality. But obviously, that's just an external factor affecting the organization. Now, internally, we can think about the way the company does things, and that could be, related to things like initiating and planning of the project. So, do we have any checklists or policies and procedures for how to do it? Do we have uh, blanks for project documents? Do we have templates? Do we have available supplier lists? Do we have Rolodexes with contact numbers for experts within given area and given fields? What are our relationships within our supplier network? What are our contractual agreements, and so on and so forth? But also, so that's kind of an initiation planning of the project. Just again, just so it's clear, these are OPAs, organizational process assets, things that the organization has that make it easier for the project work to be carried out. So for executing, monitoring, and controlling, what are our procedures for change control? How do we trace things, and how do we keep traceability in order so that we know where things are and what happened to them? How do we control our finances, and how do we carry out audits? How do we control defects, and do we have defect data going back into the past? Do we have defect issue resolution information so that we know how issues were resolved, so that we don't have to investigate the same issue 17 times? How do we manage resources, both human and non-human? How do we communicate? Do we have procedures? What kind of tools do we use? Do we have training to use those tools efficiently? Do we have any specific ways of communicating between each other? What are the templates for the things that we do? For instance, for statistical reports, for run charts, for whatever other kind of things that can come into mind, and what standards do we adhere to, and how? These are all parts of the organizational process assets. Things that a company do, that companies do, and things that help them, or like assets, resources that help companies in doing what they need to be doing at the moment. So these are OPAs, and OPAs and EEFs are going to be an input to every single thing that we're going to be considering in our project management journey going forward. Now I see a comment here about audio, guys. Can you give me thumbs up that that my audio is okay coming towards you? If not, I'll see if I can adjust things here. Thumbs up. I can see thumbs up floating around, so it might be on your end. Then over here, I think the setup is fairly okay. Okay, so let's get back to this presentation here now. EFs and OPAs are just important to note that they kind of inform our project work going to inform our project considerations going to the future. And we're going to be looking at the EFs and the OPAs as we consider processes within the project management framework. So obviously, the key OPA for many companies is the knowledge. Knowledge on what happened in the past, the project files that had been archived, hopefully. Now, in my experience, and I don't know how that works. In my experience, and in talking to people in these modules, it seems to me that archiving and recording and referring to historical data is very spotty and very patchy at times. And it would be nice if it could be better. because it might be um, it might be useful, it might be useful to kind of store stuff, look into it in the past, and just make sure that things are, um, understood without having to discover the same things all over and again. And that's where knowledge management and the knowledge storage is going to be important. Project files in particular, but anyway, that's kind of a side note. So also what comes into OPAs on the organization side is how organizations set themselves up to do what they need to do. So their systems of management, the reporting structures, the responsibility matrices, who does what, and in what way, structure of governance. So again, related to the management, related to the responsibilities of each organizational units. And finally, which we're going to talk about now, is the organizational structure, because companies have structures and it would be nice to know what they are and how they affect the project work. So, okay, I put this table in here, and it's a very comprehensive description of the currently observed and noted types of organizational structure. So what we're going to focus on are these three. We're going to have take a look at the functional organization. We're going to look at the matrix organization, and we're not really going to distinguish between the strong, weak, and balanced. And we're also going to look at the project-based organization. I just mentioned what is the difference between strong, weak, and balance. So okay, let's take a look at that. The best way to think about how organizations can be structured is to think about it this way, right? If you have if most of your focus is on operation, or on the continuously things that are done all the time and continuously repeated, then you're focusing your functional organization. If your main focus are doing projects, then you're a projectized organization. Anything in between, where you combine functional organization with projects done within the functional organization, then it's a matrix organization. Weak matrix organization prioritizes operations. Strong matrix organization prioritizes projects. Balanced matrix doesn't have a priority, so it does both at the same intensity, let's say. So those projects and operations at the same intensity. The structure of the organization kind of really affects the reporting relationships, resource allocation, and if things go wrong, who is the person that's going to get on a hot seat, really. Kind of, I guess, might be who's responsible for things. So functional organization, this is a very standard organization, and the functional means that essentially organization is caught along some functions. So you have engineering, you can have operations, you can have finance, admin, marketing, or quality, or facilities, and so on. And each of those things is called a functional silo. You can see that it's integrated vertically. There is no or very little horizontal integration along in the organization, which is useful for some things, not very good for others. Not very good for others. So very easy to control budgeting and cost, and that's because each of the functional silos would have its personal budgeting responsibility, and depending on whether the budget is set up from the bottom up or the top down, it makes it even easier to control how the expenditure is adjusted. you have a better ability to control technical aspects of your project, because within each functional silo, knowledge is accumulated extensively. Because if you have a functional silo and you can focus on the just one particular aspect of how things are done within your organization, you just become an expert much faster because you're doing just the one thing. So it's easier to become an expert. Your flexibility in the use of the manpower, because you can, within the functional silo, you can readjust, and it's not that difficult to redeploy between the silos, just a move person from one bucket to another. It's this one, and this is an important one. It's easy to for mass productions. It's easier for mass production because it's easier to predetermine responsibility structures, put very clear boundaries between responsibilities, and just make sure that the responsibilities are kept within a given function. Now the communication channels are vertical mostly. Very little communication along the horizontal channel, for better or for worse. So that's something to recognize. If there is a problem over here, if somebody notices there is a problem over here, very easily you can arrive at a decision at a really, really high level of decision making. So you can react to things quickly. I was had an experience where where I worked, we noticed an issue, and within about 5 minutes from when I reported the issue to my supervisor, we had the general manager talking about the issue and trying to contain it and resolve it, so that you can have a very quick response times, on these. Now, disadvantages are also present, and they're in particularly pertinent to the project work, because there's no one individual responsible for the total project. So if you have a project and the project coexists between engineering, operations, there's someone from finance, someone from admin, someone else over here, and then project manager comes out from over here, or wherever the project manager comes from. It might be a little bit tougher to figure out who's responsible and to get the authority. And bear in mind that the primary allegiance for the members of the project team, who would be kind of trying to report to the project manager over here, the primary allegiance is still within their functional silo. So the engineering team member is still primarily within the engineering department. And that makes it for slightly for I guess conflicts of interests and conflicts of priorities. Coordination becomes complex, especially if you need to coordinate between different functional silos. Again, difficult in pointing responsibility, and ideas tend to be functionally oriented with little regards for ongoing projects. So again, because we exist in functional organizations, we exist within the silos. We're going to prioritize our existence in those silos. Once the project is completed, one way or another, we're still going to have to perform within the silo. So we should try to keep our performance in that silo as pleasant as possible going into the future. So functional organizations, good for operations, good for process, not as good for development and projects. Now, on the other hand, you have purely projectized organizations. So here you have so there is a question related about communication. At any stage, really, within a project work, communication is key. The first point of responsibility, I guess, for communication is with the project manager, because it's up to project manager to kind of ensure that communication channels are established and open, that the way to communicate is clear to all the team members. Then from the project manager to the upper levels of the organization, those communication channels are also up to the project manager. Now, within the functional organization, within the functional organization, the communication channels are very clear within a functional silo. So if you're within the engineering, it's very clear who do you need to go to talk to in order to get an approval for something. Now, if the thing that you're seeking approval for also involves someone in operation, mightn't be as easy, because you might go talk to this person over here, or go to talk to this person over here, or this person over here. Hard to pinpoint who will be responsible. Obviously, they'll probably point you out to point you towards the responsible person, so that you can get approval for the things that you need to do. But it mightn't be as easy. Now, the question is whether communication is key at all division levels. Communication is the fundamental thing for project success, fundamental skill and ability. And many projects fail because of the poor communication, and that was one of the variables of success and failure. So going back to the project managers, strong communication channels within a project, because everybody knows everybody within their project team, and it's easy to communicate. And in here, the main subdivisions, let's say, are projects. So this is project. It says product in here, but that is the same as to say it's a project. It's a project. This is a project, and this is also a project. So it's great if your focus is a project of this organization. The customer is the focus. You work directly for the project manager. The project and the project outcome is the main focus. You can work towards that outcome with high responsiveness, with high motivation and generally good performance towards that project. But obviously, project-based organizations have some disadvantages. And for instance, if you have 3 projects and each has a widget cranking project, but you just have slightly different widget crankers, and you need to have an expert on cranking widgets, you need to support an expert on widget cranking in each of those projects, because this widget cranking expert is only working on project A, this only on project B, this only on project C. Despite, like, maybe it would be better to just have one widget cranking expert that would support all 3 projects. So from that point of view, doubling up of functions within projects might happen. So then, and I think key for this is that a tendency to retain personnel on the project level after they're needed. It's difficult to kind of you end up a project, and you end up the project within a project organization, and there is this kind of question that needs to be answered about what to do with the project team members. So the job is done. There mightn't be where to put them. So, okay, let's just keep them for longer. Let's just finish the documentation and maybe drag this thing a little bit longer so that we don't get rid of everyone. So dealing with personnel once the project is finished is slightly difficult, I guess. This one is interesting to think about and consider for a second. As mentioned, in the functional organization, within any given team or any given function, you can develop technical experts on the thing that the functional silo does. And those technical experts have very good vision about what is the best way of doing things that they need to be done. Now, in a purely project organization, it's much more difficult to develop this kind of technical expertise, and also from technical expertise, work towards the future. So oftentimes the way project organizations, they add a specific organizational development teams that look on how to improve the way we do things in the future. But obviously, not easy, and it's kind of a little bit of an extension that's added onto a building for no reason. A question about there's a question about communication again in the project. Really, I would suggest, in my estimation, in my opinion, communication is the fundamental skill of the project manager, and it's going to become a little bit clearer once we start talking about the project manager, that communication is the key responsibility. It's not only who to discuss, but also what to discuss, where, and how. And the how is the most important thing. I mean, like, if you discuss something with the wrong person, then, longer term, you might discuss this with the right person eventually. But if you discuss a thing with the right person, but you discuss it in the wrong way and you don't achieve the result that you wanted to and that you aimed for, then the project might suffer. So how to deal with people is critical. So communication, dealing with people, and like, it's if you think about actually, there is a I have a little slide on this in just a second. Okay, so now we have the matrix organizations, and they kind of allowed combination of both. And just in a really in short, what an matrix organization does, it has functional silos within which people exist and operate. But as that functional, I guess, member of a functional team is required. So if member of engineering is required for project X, that member of engineering is going to be redeployed into the project X, and his responsibility will be project X. And once project X is completed, that member is going to return to engineering and maybe support operations for a period of time. And then, in a similar way, those people that work in operations on manufacturing, they might support project X for a period of time. Once the project X is done, they'll come back to where they had been before they were reassigned. Allows for continuity, allows for skill development, allows for building of expertise. People have sense of belonging because they know where they're going to go back once the project is finished. There is no fear of not having work or not knowing what to do once the project is done. So that's quite nice. And it's definitely an improvement on both project and functional, but also has some disadvantages because you have this multidimensional information and workflow. So like, you're not only working along the project line, but you're also working within your functional department. And most commonly, people who are working within matrix organizations, they don't work on project X for 100% of time, but might be working on project X for 70% of time. So now they have 30% of time where they're going to be working on 30% of time where they're going to be working within engineering. And if they're working within engineering, they're reporting to their engineering manager, not to the project manager. So now they have to report duly, and that creates a little bit of friction in terms of priorities, goals, and objectives. So there is that. And on the bottom of it all, you have different priorities by engineering, different priorities that engineering might have or the operations might have, then the managers of the project to which the resources from those functional departments are assigned. Conflicting priorities might be problematic in that sense, but still an improvement on both functional and projectized organizations. It allows for best of both worlds, really, and within a delicate and reasonable way of managing this, it's possible to get huge benefits from running a matrix organization. Now, outside of this all, really, there exists this thing called project management office. Project management office is a part of an organization that is solely dedicated to helping projects. So if each of those airplanes in this nice little diagram is a project, the project management office will be the control tower. They support, control, and then direct the project. So obviously, there is a lot of different functions that the project management office can do. But like, to sum it up in broad strokes, they provide knowledge support. They provide decision-making support, they provide document support, they provide training in terms of project management. So they are definitely helping for project managers to run their projects. They're kind of a resource pool, which is nice to have. You know, in supportive role, they provide templates, data, best practices, lessons learned. In the directive role, they take controls of the projects by directly managing it. If the project manager doesn't do very well, obviously it's not very common. So in this controlling role, they support project management through governance, through policies and procedures. They observe the project performance by looking at specific KPIs, so that they know that project does what's supposed to do. Also, project management office has a strong responsibility for portfolio management. So because of their knowledge, I guess, because of their knowledge of qualities and performance of the project, they can easily adjust adjust the project position within the portfolio and support decisions on whether to scrap the project or continue working through it. So this is another thing that this kind of flow would support decisions or whether to deal with a project or get rid of it. So I'm not going to go through it. You can read it in your own time. And now I just want to spend some time talking about project manager. Okay, so a project manager is the individual who is assigned by the organization to lead the team that is responsible for achieving project objectives. Within the organizational hierarchy and responsibility matrix, project manager lies in here between the department and the division. But what I guess kind of what needs to be noticed over here is that responsibility of a typical project manager lies within an area that is not driven by a project. Those areas are generally driven by operations. Projects are, higher levels of the organization are driven by projects, but where a project manager operates and comes out of is not very frequently driven, which might lead to some friction. Project manager has lots of areas of influence and areas that influence the project manager. So you have the customers, the project management office, the project team, and there is a strong relationship over here. The functional heads, which are going to be dealing with the team as well as the project manager. You have governing and standardizing bodies, suppliers, stakeholders, end users, and the managers, resource managers. So there is a lot of I suppose there are a lot of interfaces that a project manager needs to connect to, and a lot of people and at different levels of the organization that the project manager needs to deal with. So that makes for an exciting job, I'm sure. Crucially, the project manager leads project to its objective, demonstrates the value of the project for when the portfolio management process takes place, so the project doesn't get scrapped. And then it gets the project done, communicates, interacts, gets the project done. And you can think about the areas of influence and the areas of relationship for the project manager, from the project team through sponsors all the way out to end users and stakeholders. All of those circles of influence have an impact on the project manager, which again makes for an interesting job. Now, a project manager, in ideal case scenario, would have knowledge about what's being done. They would be able to get work done, so that's the performance, and they would also be a person, they would have some personal skills, personal competencies. Now, obviously, like if you have one or not the other, you can be either a loving teacher or leader without direction or a dictator. But if you have all three, then you're going to be able to lead the project towards fruition. Personal and soft skills are probably the most critical set for currently run projects where where technical knowledge is readily available, within the company or somewhere else, but the ability to bring people to get the work done, make sure that the work is done within the constraints of budget, time, and quality, not as easy to do. So that's why the personal skills are the more important ones than the technical. The technical one, obviously, none of this matters if you can't get the work done. So there's also that. So as the project manager suggests, project managers should have ability to manage projects. So they would need to know the project management, and that means that they should be familiar with what is the actual project management framework, what does it involve, the kind of things that are being done during the process of project management. They should be able to manage from the strategic and business standpoint. So dealing with schedules, dealing with costs, dealing with people and with conflict, and then provide leadership to their team. So being at the front of where the work is done and showing direction, motivating their people, and bringing them together with themselves towards the goal of the project. So that would be nice if project managers had all those competencies. That would mean that projects can get done. So what do they need to do? Well, they need to explain the business aspect of the projects, work with the team, implement strategy. So these are the kind of soft skills, but they also need to focus on the technical aspects. They need to very important, because this is where the performance becomes into place. They need to make sure that the critical factors are satisfied. So schedule, the constraints of time, cost, and quality are met or are not broken. They need to be flexible enough so that they can use all the tools that are available within the project management framework. They should be able to plan and deliver. So there is a lot of competing priorities on the project managers, but also a lot of requirements for deep project management skills. So now, just thinking a little bit more about the human relations oriented project manager, they should educate their team. They need to make sure that team members feel the recognition. They need to provide credit when it's due. They need to provide the sense of belonging and the sense of relatedness to their team. They need to, again, that's the sense of relatedness, but also provide the team with the opportunity to develop their mastery and have a sense of purpose. And now, on the other hand, we have the formal authority kind of oriented leadership techniques, which are, they're not wrong. There is nothing negative with the authority oriented leadership. Absolutely not. But that means that the shift in terms of how the motivation of the employees is achieved is moved from the internal motivation towards externalized motivation, which is going to impact on its quality and resulting drive of the employees or the team members towards performance. So there's definitely something to be cognizant of, especially if you're going to threaten with intervention of place authority on some people, if you're going to be controlling. A lot of those authority-oriented leadership techniques, they will work. But if you want to consider performance versus leadership technique, if here you have authoritative and here you have human relationships, one's performance on this one might be much higher than over here. And that's because in this case, people are driven by the SDT, which means that they're driven by their internal motivations in order to achieve their performance objectives. So to achieve humane leadership, we need to start moving from the field on the left, where we have mistrust, power, internal focus. Actually, this is something that I've been reading about recently. about in people's performance trying to focus on the outside world, which means that try to focus on helping your team members rather than figuring out how you yourself can get your work done, because the resulting change in performance of the team members is actually providing added benefit to you as a person as well. So from internal to external focus, that's probably a better way, from conformity, from bureaucracy, from tactical thinking. I'm going to highlight this one, and from compliance, meeting standards. We need to move towards developing trust between the team members, to develop our ability to do things. So that's skills over here. Focus on teamwork, focus on taking risks, innovation, flexibility, collaborate with other ones, focus on lifelong education, which we're all involved and engaged in here right now. Think strategically. So rather than responding to things that are happening right now, be proactive and make sure that you anticipate and things happening in the future and put together a plan to respond to those things before they happen, and commit to continuous improvement. So that live within this this Japanese way of kaizen, which is continuous small improvements, which is, I suppose, nice to think about and also applicable to personal lives. So there is a difference between management and leadership. And when I first thought about this, and I've been thinking about it for a while, I was under impression that management is a negative aspect and leadership is a positive aspect. But now that I thought about it for a while, I realized that management is a function that's needed, as well as leadership. We need people who are good managers. I mean, without good managers, operations mightn't be as operational as we would want them to be, and operations are the bread and butter of what we do. So we need to make sure that we could have good managers. Now, while we have good managers, we need to make sure that we have managers that act as humans, that act from a human perspective, that take other people into considerations, that they're not, forgive my metaphor, slave drivers. That would be ideal. So you don't have to direct using power. You can use prestige or recognition. Doesn't really matter. You administrate, you focus on system, on structure, you rely on control systems and control. Yeah, I would say that might be the case. Focus on near-term goals, but also should have some longer-term objectives. Focus on the bottom line in operations. I mean, I don't think there is avoiding of focusing on the bottom line in operations, specifically when our operations in practically all businesses are a race to the bottom, that's informed by low costs of labor in other geographical locations. So we have to be focusing on bottom line. And as much as accepting status quo is probably not needed, we need to be sure that the status quo we're accepting is the status quo that leads to the most optimum operations, that kind of way. So there's nothing wrong with accepting it, as long as it means that optimum performance is gathered. Do things right, but rather do the right things right for operations, and focus on operational issues and problem solving. Obviously important, because if we can't crank the widgets, then we can't really get the money into our pockets. And leadership obviously is a different side of this coin. You focus on the development, innovation, you inspire trust. That should be in this column as well. You should focus on long range vision, ask what and why. This should be in this column as well. Do the things right should be in this column as well. So aspects of leadership should be present in management. Perhaps some aspects of management should be present in leadership. But again, to me, the key thing in here is that this should all be done from the human perspective, where we treat each other as humans, with taking our motivations into considerations, our personalities, goals, objectives, and so on. So that would be good. And if you're a project manager, a couple of directing questions that might help you decide on work that needs to be done and deal with that work would be: what am I doing that I don't have to do at all? Just get rid of it. Also, I suppose, before anything else, what am I doing and why? And that question, I continue to ask this question myself, and it helps me kind of select activities that I need to be doing, and I shouldn't be doing. So what am I doing, and why am I doing this? What am I doing that I don't have to do at all? What am I doing that can be done by someone else? What am I doing that could be done as well as me by someone else? And am I doing the things that I should be doing? So project management, 99% of project management is just finding out the right person to delegate something to, so that you can focus on this 1% of the most important, most impactful activities as a project manager. Decide fast, but make sure that your decisions are right. Learn to say no so that you can free up some time and mental space. And really work on procrastination, manage by exception. So these are soft tips, which are useful but tough to implement. And then we're moving into project management, which is going to be topic of our lecture next week. So Jean, if you would like to stop the recording now, that would be great, please.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much.